Okay, so good day, class. In our previous recording, we have talked about the concept of validity. Okay, so for this recording, we're going to talk about the 4 sources of validity evidence according to Popham. Okay, so I'm going to talk as much as I can within the 10-minute range. Para medyo short lang yung ating recording. So according to Popham, there are 4 sources of validity evidence. Okay, this is from the test content itself, from the response processes of the students, of course, from the internal structure of the test, and how the test is related to other variables. Okay, so what you see here are the brief descriptions for each of the evidences according to Popham. Okay, so the test content is as follows. Okay, so ang test content evidence po natin, according to our brief description here, this is the extent to which an assessment procedure adequately represents the content of the curricular aims being measured. Sometimes it's also called content-related evidence, or sa research field, it's called content validity. Okay? So, according to a different resource, particularly sabi ni Cohen, this type of validity measures the validity that is based on an evaluation of the subjects, topics, or content covered by the items in the test. Okay? So, it does not talk about the item itself. It talks about the content that the item covers. Okay? So, yun po yung kailangan nating tignan. Okay? So, sabi naman ni Popham, ito daw uri ng validity na ito ay the adequacy with which the content of a test represents the curricular aim. Okay, ito rin yung nasa taas, actually. Okay? As I stated here, what's important to understand is that the content validity asks whether the contents or topics to be assessed are included in the test instrument. Okay? Ito yung medyo common sense. Kung gusto mong i-test yung skills ng bata sa, for example, subject-verb agreement, of course, the test would contain items on subject-verb agreements and not items on the parts of speech, not items on the different poems made by Shakespeare. The items themselves cover the content you want them to measure. Okay? So, for example, sa science then, if I want to measure the knowledge of the students regarding the water cycle, the items would contain questions on the water cycle from the evaporation, precipitation, condensation, etc. etc. Wala po sila makikitang life cycle ng mosquito doon. Okay? Wala po sila makikitang chemical composition ng water. Kasi hindi po yun yung tinatanong natin when we want to establish content validity. What's important here, class, is that when you go to DepEd, ang content validity ninyo ay ma-anchor ninyo, of course, sa learning competencies na within your curriculum guide. Okay? Kaya po napakalaki ng anchor or ng usage ng curriculum guide when you become professionals yourselves. Okay? So as I stated here, the main consideration for content validity would be your objectives. Okay? Kaya dapat po, ang objective mo ay naka-SMART framework. Are they specific? Because if your items are not specific, chances are magiging mababa yung iyong content validity, especially kapag napakalawak ng iyong construct na i-measure. Okay? Sa curriculum guide po, makikita po natin itong content validity sa content standards. Okay? Kasi, di ba nga, ang content standards, ito yung mga knowledge na dapat alam ng mga students. Of course, if your test is to have content validity, it should follow the content standards that we have in our curriculum guide. So, in this endeavor, ang pinakakailangan nyo po would be a table of specification. Kasi po, sa table of specification, nakalagay po doon kung ilang hours nating itinuro yung isang learning competency. Okay? Kasi po nakadepende yung number of items covering a construct, covering an objective sa kung gaano katagal mong kinover yung objective na yon. So for example, gagawa ka ng 10-point quiz, 'di ba? Tapos ang objective mo lang ay dalawa. Yung isa tinuro mo ng 3 hours. Si objective 2 tinuro mo ng 6 hours. So dapat naturally yung quiz na gagawin mo mas marami yung nagko-cover kay objective 2 na tinuro mo for 6 hours compared kay objective 3 na 3 hours mo lang tinuro. Okay? So, ganun po yung isa sa mga usage ng content validity or ng TOS sa pag-ensure ng content validity. Okay? So, sabi din po ni Popham, or actually sinite niya si Webb dito, okay, sabi niya, there is a need for alignment of content in a constructed test. So, ano pong alignment na yun? There are 4 alignments according to Webb. Okay, sabi niya, merong categorical concurrence are identical or essentially equivalent categories employed for both curricular aims and assessments. What does this mean? What this means is that your assessment should be equivalent to the curricular aims that it aims to measure. Okay? So, hindi ka po gagawa ng pen and paper test para sa isang curricular aim that is more that is more adaptable for performances. Okay? So, ganun po yung pinaka-idea sa categorical concurrence. Kung ano, kaya papapasok dito yung yung sound design. Kung ang objective ba ay measurable ng pen and paper, you still have to ask, is it the best way to measure, to assess that particular curricular aim? Kasi baka pag merong ibang test na mas appropriate, mas valid yun. Okay? Then you have depth of knowledge consistency. To what degree are the cognitive demands of curricular aims and assessments identical? What does this mean? Yung test mo, halimbawa, kung ang objective mo nakalagay doon, students should be able to analyze, okay, how a particular aspect of the water cycle is affecting the environment. Okay, ang haba ng statement. Ibig ko lang sabihin, nakaka-analyze sila. Dapat yung test item mo ay under sa Bloom's Taxonomy, nandun din sa analyzing. Hindi pwedeng ang objective mo ay nakafocus sa evaluating, tapos ang item mo dun lang sa remembering. Hindi pwede. Hindi pareho yung depth of knowledge ng objective sa iyong ginagawang test item. Yun po yung ibig sabihin ng depth of knowledge consistency. Kung nasaan sa Bloom's Taxonomy yung objective mo, kung ganun kalalim yung cognitive processes na ginagamit ng objective, dapat ganun din kalalim yung tinitest ng mga test items mo. And then you have the range of knowledge. Is the breadth of your knowledge reflected in curricular aims and assessments the same? What this means to say is that kung ano yung na-cover ng iyong objective, dapat yun din yung kino-cover ng iyong test item. Kung hanggang water cycle ka lang, hanggang doon lang yung range ng iyong test item. Huwag ka maglalagay ng mga test item na nakabase sa susunod na lesson after ng water cycle. Hindi po pwede yun. Yung range of knowledge ay magkaiba. And finally, you have balance of representation. Ito yung nasabi ko na kanina. Kung mas mahaba mong diniscuss yung isang topic, dapat mas maraming test items sa quiz or sa test exam na gagawin mo na nagko-cover doon sa mas matagal mong naituro. That is balance of representation. Hindi pwedeng yung isang oras mo lang tinuro doon manggagaling lahat ng test items. No. Okay? Dapat po, yung mas matagal tinuro, mas representative. Mas kitang-kita sa exam na ginawa mo. Again, so sa alignment po, meron po tayong 4 na tinitignan. Yung appropriateness ng test instrument na gagawin mo sa objective na kanyang i-measure. So ito po yung napag-usapan na natin sa previous assessment of learning natin. Pag performance task, yung nire-require ng isang objective, dapat performance task yung nire-ready mong test. Okay? Depth of knowledge, meaning kung anong cognitive level yung ini-invive ng content standards, ganun ding cognitive level yung mini-measure ng iyong test items or test instrument. The range of knowledge covers the topics. Kung anong mga topic lang yung naituro mo, kung anong mga topic yung dinidemand ng objective, yun din dapat yung ilalagay mo sa test paper. Okay? And of course, the balance of representation. Yun nga, matagal mong tinuro, mas madami dapat yung items na kino-cover niya. Okay? So, as a teacher, na-judge mo to yourself, of course. However, si Popham sabi niya, it's always better to consult with your peers, especially with your co-teachers on this type of validity. Kasi po, kayo, students, you will become new teachers. Okay? If you're new teachers, you may lack the experience that other teachers have, especially when it comes to measuring. Okay? So, a lot of times, we would need their expertise on how they actually measured a particular objective sa ating curriculum guide. Okay? So, dapat po, ginagamit natin yung mga resources na ito. Sabi rin ni Popham, okay? Popham asserts that high-stakes tests must undergo formal survey on experts before said tests could be administered, while low-stakes tests may have informal consultation. So, naglagay na po ako dyan ng isang formal consultation form na gawa ni Elangovan and Sandavarel in their 2021 paper. Okay, so I highly recommend na tignan niyo po yung paper na yan. Of course, you can follow different formats for a formal assessment or for a formal content validity. Okay? Again, ginagamit po yun sa high-stakes test sa mga periodical exams, term exams, that covers a lot of the grades of the students. Or sa final demo nyo, for example, nasa high-stakes test. Kasi pag di kayo pumasa ng final demo, hindi kayo pasa sa practice teaching. And practice teaching is required for you to get your degree. Laki-laki nga ng units, so 6 units. Okay? Ang mga low stakes test, yung mga short quizzes, mga graded recitation, minsan kokonti lang yan. Okay? Sa parts ng grades ng students. Okay? So, again, when establishing content validity, it's always helpful to get second opinion from your peers, from your head teachers, from your principal, kung close yung principal, or even experts on the field themselves. Kaya nga meron tayong researchers, okay, para ma-improve yung ating body of knowledge and yung ating experience na hindi pa natin nakukuha when we are neophytes or new teachers. Okay? And then pag high stakes, dapat formal yung pagkuha mo ng content validity. Pag low stakes, medyo kahit informal lang, okay lang yun. Okay? So, that is how you establish content validity. Okay? So, the second measure of test evidence is this, the response process. So, maliit lang siya, actually, if you look at it in the module. Sabi dito, this pertains to the evidence gathered from the responses of the students, and it is used infrequently in classroom assessment as it is used more on psychological assessments. Okay? So, ano ba isipin nito? This is when you study the actual responses of your students on a multiple choice test or on different types of tests. Okay? Actually, yung susunod na lesson dito, which is talks about item analysis, if we could actually pursue that one, we are forced to analyze the test items based on how the students responded to each item. So that type of validity evidence is under response processes. Hindi siya gaanong ginagamit kasi it requires you to already administer the test. And pag na-administer mo yung test, it requires a bit of mathematical ideas. Okay? Hindi naman tayo lahat magaling sa math. And of course, meron kang classical test theory and then meron kang mga panibagong theory na kahit yung mga teachers ninyo, I assure you, mahihirapang intindihin. I myself, I think, akala mo magaling ako sa math. Pagtingin ko sa mga bagong theories when it comes to response processes, ang dami rin palang requirements na prerequisite knowledge. Dapat magaling ka sa psychological assessments, which is yung psychometrics. This is a really good field. So if you have interest in this, I highly recommend you read books on psychometrics. Okay? So this type of evidence asserts that test requires the students to utilize cognitive processes, and is thus concerned with how these cognitive processes manifest. When you say cognitive processes, di ba, we're talking about Bloom's taxonomy for one. Kasi Bloom's taxonomy covers cognitive processes. Kaya po gumagamit tayo ng TOS dito. We want to ensure na yung ating mga test item ay talagang na-measure yung mga cognitive processes na gusto nating i-measure nila. Okay? So, saan ba useful ito? Nagbigay po si Popham dito na isang example. Sabi niya, a potentially useful setting in which validity evidence would be based on student response is when educators monitor the nature of a student's skill in writing. Okay? By keeping track of this development, okay, validity evidence can be assembled regarding how well students can write. Ano ibig sabihin nito? Meron pong natural development, natural growth yung mga students when it comes to getting skills. Okay? So sometimes this growth is the same for all students. Some are not. Kasi ang isa pong tinitingnan natin when it comes to validity is the teaching and the testing method. Okay? If a student gets better on a test paper with time, chances are the test paper is valid. Because, yun nga, merong development yung bata po doon. Okay? So, that's one example of how student responses can be used to draft the validity of a paper. Okay? But more so, we're going to talk about validity on validity regarding response processes on our next lesson. Okay? So, the recording is already 17 minutes. So again, dito po sa recording na to, we talked about two types of validity evidence. Yung isa, yung mabigat, which is content validity na required sa lahat ng mga quizzes natin. Okay? Itong response process, this is more used for analyzing each item or analyzing the test instrument itself based on the cognitive processes used by students. This is quite hard to measure and can require you to have psychometric knowledge. Okay? What, again, ang pinaka-goal mo kasi sa response process is to get the cognitive processes used by students, which are not exactly measurable because you will have to go into the minds of your students. Okay? So, yung susunod na evidences, that is for our next recording. So, that is all. Thank you for listening to this recording, and I'll see you on the next one. Okay? Bye, class.